Running fans, throwing fans, jumping fans, all around athletics fans, welcome to Talking in Ovals. I am Alex Cuesta. Over there, it's my partner in crime, the man everyone comes to hear, Dave Hyatt. What's going on, brother?
What another amazing weekend, man. We had my favorite meet of the whole season, the Penn Relays. Crazy weather, pouring rain, wind, but some incredible races. And, obviously our home state of New Jersey did an absolute amazing job.
Yes, we did. As we always do when we go into those meets, we always show out. But, I really feel like at one point, Dave, everyone's going to think that you just kind of push a button for what an amazing weekend in track. Because I feel like every single episode, it's been that way since we started this. We've had some ridiculous weekends. So before we get into the fun stuff, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go find us on the socials. And if you're here and listening, we are recording on Monday, May 1st of 2023. It is already May. Where the hell is the time going?
Crazy.
But it's good because spring track is still rolling along. Before we get into our, things for this week, go listen to last week's episode. We had actually a fantastic episode. Dave's arguably his best friend, but one of his best friends, Jay Claphouse, came on the show. Great time reminiscing about those two guys, what they did in high school, how much fun they had, and kind of a different context where Jay was a gifted runner, didn't really find that out until late in his high school career, went to Penn State, showed out, but didn't really get the shake because he wasn't a money guy. And just go listen to it. It's a great story. Jay's a good dude, so we had an awesome time. So, Hyatt, do we have any PRs this week?
We did get a couple sent to us from our buddy at Westfield, Chris Defelsky. His team ran in the Championship of America DMR, finishing 4th place in 10:17. We had Liam Murillo run 307.75 for the 12. Joe Piero 49.56 for the 4. Johnny Scalia 156.9 for the 8, and then Avery Keith in 423.20. That's not his PR, but again, it was cold. It was rainy, and New Jersey went 2-3-4 in the DMR. CBA, Del Barton, and Westfield. Union Catholic girls won the 4x8 in almost a new national record in that horrible weather. So it was just an amazing meet. And anybody who doesn't have Flow Sports, I would highly recommend getting it. The coverage was awesome. It was just fantastic. I finally broke the bank and paid for it, and it's incredible. It's so good.
So I'm calling shenanigans on all the times. It's all the shoes. That's what we discovered. It's all the damn shoes. But anyway, I want to give a shout out to Isam Asinga, probably saying your name wrong, but Isam Asinga. We talked about him last week, beating Noah Lyles with the 9.83. Well, he came back this week and decided, beating the best 100-meter runner in the country wasn't enough. He came and he ran a 19.97 to break Noah Lyles' 20.09 high school record. So Noah, he's coming after everything you're doing. But I just want to point out, Jonathan Galt, friend of the show, we've had him on before, pointed out something that even though the 19.97 is fast, is technically a record, Arian Knighton is the fastest high school age sprinter of all time. He ran a 19.49 as a pro, even though he was high school age. So kind of, great, not taking away anything from ISOM. Awesome race. But man, Arian Knighton being 18 years old and running a 19.49 is just stupid. So let's get into this week's show. This week, we have an awesome show. Dave, I'm finally pulling my weight. Finally getting one of my friends. It's been all of your friends coming on the show. And it's about time I stopped being useless. So I got one of my friends here, a good buddy of mine. We ran all 4 years together at Marist while I was hurt. He was doing great things, but he's Adam Vess. He's an ex-competitive athlete who made a career in the athletic industry, continuing to do what he loves in track and field and running and things like that. Vess, what's going on, brother?
Oh, not much, man. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the show. So before the show, I was about to tell a story to Hyatt, how I first met Vess, and I think it'll be fitting that I tell this story now. So going in,
I don't remember this, so I'm very entertained.
It is entertaining. You listen, you probably didn't remember me. That's the fun part. So going in, doing the whole entire recruiting process or whatever, I contact head coach Pete Colizzo, and we get interested, and we set up an official visit. And the week I'm supposed to come, the day I'm supposed to come, I get there. I meet my, older guy that I'm supposed to hang out with, Colin Johnson, who's awesome dude, really good guy. But I'm there and I'm with him and another guy, Alex Lombardozzi, living in their house. And they're super nice, but there was a buzz to the team. And here's me. I'm like, I'm decently fast high school runner, nothing special. Coming in, gonna be injured, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden we go on a run. And I'm running and I'm like, the college, I'm gonna hang behind. And there was just a flock of collegiate runners up front. And then all of a sudden I hear them they're like, oh, don't you know who's here? And it's like, I don't know who. It's like, oh, Adam Vess. He's national competitor, 5K national champion. It's like, wait, what the hell? Who's this guy? And that's my first impression of Adam Vess, being a little mini celebrity with a small flock, small school, Marist College, because Marist is not used to getting the caliber of runner. So Vess, that's my first impression of you. That I barely think we talked. I think we said hi. I think I told you my PR was 431, and you kind of didn't look at me after that.
I'm sorry.
He is a nice guy, I promise. So that's my impression of Adam. And no, Adam ended up being, we ended up being pretty friendly, pretty close on the team. We talked a lot. I did some training with you, which was never fun, but it was good. So I want to jump into the first segment of this podcast that we always do. We focus on you, Vess. When did you first get that spark to be a runner? Basically that this is going to be the sport that you're going to be able to do for a long time.
Yeah. To be honest, I feel like I put off being a runner through middle school. My whole family were competitive distance runners. I think my mother's the oldest of 10, and 6 of them ran competitively in college. There was a couple of trial qualifiers, and it was all just overwhelming to a kid. And then, I was getting into stuff in middle school that was not ideal. May have involved police once or twice. And my parents basically sat me down, and I ended up going to this all guys Catholic high school down in Connecticut, Xavier, where most of my family had ran previously. And my uncle was the assistant coach at the time. And I was basically told I was running cross country. So I just showed up blinders on, I'm here to do this. This is what I have to do. And I just ran with it, no pun intended. But it was fun. There was a good group of guys. We trained really hard, harder than you probably should in high school.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
That was the mentality then. It was just go hard every day.
You went to that school to run cross country. And I think I was second guy on the team for most of freshman year. It was a good environment. So I learned a lot, and I kind of, I don't know, got my ass in gear, turned stuff around outside of school, and just had something to focus on.
So did you actually fall in love with the sport at that time when you really started to get the camaraderie across country? Did you ever fall in love with the sport, or was it always kind of a job for you where, you something you had to do?
No, I absolutely fell in love with the sport. Immediately, when you're that young and you just start having success in something, you're just gonna enjoy the hell out of it, and that's all it was. I looking back, I had an awesome circle of friends, guys I still talk with regularly to this day, and we were all super gung ho. There was a bunch of guys on the team that were kids of alumni that were coming from the same boat as me. Kind of expectations on their shoulders, and we just did our job. So for 4 years, we just trained our ass off and did what we could. And I loved every minute of it. Wanted to do it in college, probably by the end of freshman year, start of sophomore year. And it was good.
So, it's funny. It's to a T. All the greats that we've talked to, whether it's Johnny Gray, Kadivas Robinson, Julie Cully, the Slattery, Sarah, and Steve, all of them have flat out said, I was trying to do another sport. I was not doing track. I started to love track when I started winning, when I had success, when I was good at it. And it's such a bizarre thing because you do fall in love with the sport. You do actually end up enjoying the pain, enjoying the grind. But it's never something any of us initially want to do. I played soccer and football. We were all doing so many different things. And all of a sudden it's you go out, you drop a fast time, you beat someone at the line, and that feeling, that euphoria, it's yes, it's kind of dope. I like this. It's so different than any other sport.
You're just a young, impressionable kid at that point. So whatever success you have is amplified, and you're just gonna follow it and like chase that high. And I was no exception to that. I just started having success, and I just wanted to like kick the hell out of the next guy.
So you're in high school. Did you have the feeling that maybe a lot of our other guests did, like it was more about team, like individual stuff was great, but there was nothing better than running a relay or doing great in a cross country race as a team, or was your focus more on your effort as an individual?
No, my focus was fully on the team aspect. I was not lead runner freshman year. There was a guy on the team who was arguably more talented than me, like across the board, that should have been our lead runner for 4 years. And he had his own demons to deal with a little bit later in life than I did. But I loved the guys that I was with and loved the camaraderie of it. But we had the talent pool coming in freshman year that we were literally sitting in meetings in this environment. And they were like, you guys have they're talking like 13-year-old kids. And like, you guys have the talent to take the state New England championship. No question your senior year. And that's all we need
expectation. To hear. That's a lot of expectation right there though.
Yeah. But there was a ton of us. Like, I feel like most schools are like happy to have like 1 or 2 guys under like 5 minutes freshman year.
Yeah.
And I think there was 4 or 5 of us that were like solid freshmen coming through. Like the writing was on the wall, and we just had to do our job.
And, and I'll say this, and Adam talks about the team thing, and we'll talk about Marist some more a little bit later. But I have to say, my time at Marist when Adam was there, you couldn't find a more humble dude. Like Adam's Adam. He's outgoing, funny dude. But when it came talking about track, he would never tell you how well he ran. It would always be like, I ran like shit there. Like I could have done that better. But he was always like really good. Like I was not a good runner at Marist. I was always hurt. I sucked. And
so was I. So.
You were always hurt, but you actually still succeeded. You still had really good races. You broke some records. You did some really good stuff for the school. But it's like, even then, like, just going to talk to Adam, he would just be like, keep training, pick yourself back up. There's nothing, just, grind. Like that was just Adam's mentality. He always wanted to make sure that people in his own way had the right mindset, like never let us get too down if we went to seek him out. So it was always a good thing to have a lead guy like Adam on the team. It was always good. So I want you to start now. Go down memory lane. You talked about your spark. I want to hear some stories. Maybe some not suitable for work. This is a podcast. Who cares? But I want to go through some stories. Talk about your high school career. Go through college, post grad, and bring us up to your career now because you never left the running world. So give us some good memories, some good stories, some of your favorite stuff.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mentioned like everyone told us like we were this super good talent and we were going to like take all these titles. We didn't take a single one. It just like happened to be that like, I think it was Danbury and Glastonbury at the time in Connecticut were like 2 of the teams ranked in like the top 5 in the US. And we were like, I think we were sitting at best like top 20, which at the time, like the way everything was structured meant like we weren't winning shit. So it like, despite all of that initiative and like momentum up like from the first time we step foot through the door, we always saw ourselves as the underdogs, which I think was like a blessing, to be honest. We were always kind of like the scrappy guys, like literally our lead runner my freshman year. We lost him for like a year and a half to like alcohol rehab, and like he came back, and I think my senior year he was like our 3rd guy, but he missed so much training. We were always just like that scrappy team that put stuff together as best we could. Not to take away from anyone else on the team. Like, I mean, our guys ended up when we were at Marist. I think Chris Zablocki was the lead runner at Dartmouth, fighting Ben True pretty consistently. Forrest was top 2 or 3 guys at Syracuse. Like everyone went on to do good things.
Yeah, we
just never all like hit it on the same day then. But it was a ton of fun to just have that much talent around you. Like any 10-mile run that we had in high school, like it was a pissing contest every step of the way.
Oh yeah.
Which was awesome. Looking back, like it probably wasn't the healthiest thing for me. Being that I think I had 11 stress fractures in my undergrad.
Yep. I think that you might be lowballing. I think those are only the ones that that you let them find out about. No,
there was a couple of stress reactions that I may or may not have just like taken like liquid comfrey and hope for the best. But no, it was fun. And it all culminated with like our senior year. Honestly, one of the proudest moments I had as a captain on the team. I had qualified for the Milrose games in the mile in high school. And I was at the Milrose games and had a fever of like 103, 104. And the trainer literally is like looking at me warming up. And he's like, I can't let you on the track. I was like, nah, I'm fine. Like, just let me run. And the guy's like, nah, you can't run. Like, we can't have you die on national television. So the trainer on site pulled me from the track. Like, I was trying to step on, like, just white with like sweat pouring off my face. And I couldn't compete in the Milrose games, which is what I had worked for like all of indoor season thus far. So in order to go to that meet, I had foregone going to our conference championship. And I got a call on the train back to Connecticut that our guys had actually won the title without me in Connecticut.
Wow.
And it was just everyone else coming up strong, knowing full well that like I wasn't there. They weren't getting first in, I don't know, 4x8. I think they still took the 4x8. But like the mile, 2 mile, like they weren't coming up with the win on it. And I was stoked. Like just the fact that those guys came up big without me even there. And they were literally posting like without Vess on like, I think it was Facebook at the time. It was all the team photos coming through. And that was awesome. That was actually one of like my happiest moments in high school. And like, I should have been devastated that like I went to Milrose and couldn't run. But I was stoked, and we came back for the state meet a few weeks later, and like everyone just ran out of their minds.
So I'm going to let you brag about yourself a little because you don't like to do that, but I'm going to, and I'm going to let you talk about it because you were the Nike National 5K National Champion senior year. And at that time, you ran a meet record in that race, beating a really good New Jersey runner, Doug Smith, who, really good. I was a guy I competed against all throughout high school, ended up being much better to me. But, we had some good races against each other in bigger meets. And tell me when did it click for you that you have a shot? Because, obviously, a bunch of us ran really well freshman year and all of a sudden, boom, Olympics, that's where our heads go. But then reality starts to set in and you're running well. And it's like, okay, I know I'm good in my conference. I could probably be competitive in the state. When did it click for you that you can actually go for nationals if you really like set your mind to it? When was that a goal between your coach, yourself, and things like that?
To be totally honest, I was shocked when I checked in to that meet and I was the first seed. I very much like kept my head in the sand and was like, hey, like I'm just going to get like whatever I can get out of my body. And like I was coming into the race, I think it was a 9-minute 2-miler and I don't know, like 4:15, 4:16 in the mile. Like I had somewhat of a kick, but not enough actual speed to run the mile in high school. And I checked in and they were like, cool, you're seed number 1. So I literally called my father and was like, what the hell? Like, I got lucky. That field just happened to play out to me. The guys kind of left it to a kick. No one wanted to lead. So I led, I think the last 3K. I think I lost the lead with like 2 laps to go, but I somehow closed in like a 27, just angry and pissed off that I'd led that much. And some little kid from New Jersey was about to outkick me.
Doug had a kick too. Doug did have a kick.
Now, I have a question. Had you run any other 5Ks that a spring? Because that's not really an event that you can find in almost any high school race. So was that your first time running the 5K?
I think that was literally my first
cross country, right?
Yeah. And the time was decent. I think it was like 14:37, 14:38.
Just to tell you,
it was
that's
solid.
A great time in high school.
But we wasted, in retrospect, like we wasted the first 3K of that race because no one was comfortable taking the lead at a championship. So I just eventually got angry which like for me works.
Yeah.
And I just took it and ran with it.
It's funny to you talk about not having a kick in high school, because that was like your secret weapon at Marist, that you had like a 55 in your back pocket, regardless of what race you were in. And that actually, we're going to talk about another one. We'll talk about a little bit later, led to your IC championship against Kyle Merber. So, but I want you to continue a little bit. You were talking about the race. You win that race. What's going through your head at that point? And at that point too, you were already committed to Marist, if I'm not correct, right? At that point, that you win nationals.
Like contracts were signed, everything was done.
Yeah.
And I'm in retrospect, like really glad the contracts were signed, because otherwise, like, I don't know where the hell I would have ended up.
I was gonna say, do you have any regret knowing that it could have brought you, because you eventually went to Northern Arizona, which is now big, but that race could have definitely, that springboards you to some bigger teams. Do you have any regret about committing to Marist so early?
I don't. To be honest, my senior year was just a shit show, and it was just a comedy of errors. Like, I was originally supposed to run for Syracuse, and they were like, "Cool, like, we just need you to qualify for Foot Locker, see how you end up." And like, I took my official, they gave me a package, but at the time they had basically blown their budget on, I think, Steve Murdoch out of Saratoga, or Shen at the time, because he switched like weirdly junior year. So I had talked to those guys. I had been talking with Iona and a couple other schools, and I showed up at Foot Locker regionals with it. This is like, it happened twice in my career, and both of them were like, I don't know, serendipitous. I had a fever at regionals, puked my brains out. I literally threw up, I think, on the feet of Coach Fox with like a K to go in the race, and like top 10 move on. I think I was like 50th. Like, it was just a terrible showing. And any aspirations or like what I was looking at as like D1 prospects went out the door. Milrose being my next like national showing, a similar situation. Like, I was just labeled like a choke artist. And Marist, like, one of my uncles had ran for Pete years ago. I think like it might have been his first year coaching at Marist, first or second. David Swift had ran for him, and Pete's like, "Hey, we've got money for you. Like, I'm one of 7 kids," and was like, "Cool, like, that's what I need to go to school, bottom line." Like, so I signed the Marist contract as soon as it was put in front of me. And then I ended up winning nationals, like, I think a couple weeks later, which I don't think any of us were expecting. I mean, Pete was pretty ecstatic, but yeah, that was basically it. Like, I had talked with a bunch. I got a bunch of phone calls afterwards. I think the assistant coach, Chuck, can tell you all the recruiting calls that they got from other schools asking what paperwork I had signed. And Chuck basically had the pleasure of hanging up on a bunch of major universities.
And I know Chuck takes nothing more than and we had Chuck on the show. He's now the women's head coach, but at the time he was the sprint coach and the assistant coach over at Marist, and Marist alumni in his own right. And yeah, anyone that knows Chuck knows that he was smiling ear to ear each time when he was saying like, "Bye. This isn't a phone call that we're taking. See you later."
He got to hang up on a couple figures that no one else can say they got to hang up the phone on. So no, it was fun. And yeah, I finished that race, the 5K, and like I was ecstatic, obviously. And then it like immediately set in that I had like a DMR to run like 12 hours later.
Oh no. How did that one go?
It went fine. If I remember right, our 800 guy shit the bed. Forrest, that Syracuse kid, I think ran like 310.
Mass.
Our 800 guy was like, yeah, Forrest was a junior. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Our 800 guy like shit the bed. He ran like 205, 206. He just did not have what it took. But we ended up running like 10:17 or something. Like, it was, really good. Fine. I think we got outkicked by Burnt Hills, if I remember right. But it was great. And I don't know, I got to be the anchor on like my team's final relay, like as a team. I had a lot of ground to catch up, and I think I lost by like a lean at the line. So
you're probably coming off of such a high from being a national champion. What was that like walking into that meet? Everybody knows you're the national champion in the 5K at that point. What was did you feel a little celebrity? Was it a little surreal, kind of out of body as you were getting up there? Like, what was that like?
To be honest, I remember, what was the big high school in New Jersey? Craig Forys and all that.
Colts Neck.
Colts Neck. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember those guys
10:04 that year. They got second.
Yeah. So we were the second heat behind those guys. Right. And I knew Forey's anchor was going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, he was a 408 guy.
We're literally like, hey, we need to run this time to even have a prayer of placing in the hot heat. And I was listening to their coach talk to their guys. They're like, hey, like this kid has a kick. Like, just watch him. This is what we have to outdo later on. And I like jokingly leaned over to Forrest and was like, man, I just ran the 5K because I knew Craig was going to kick my ass in the 2 mile. And like the Colts Next coach like lost his shit laughing on the side of the track. Like we just kept the whole thing super light. Like it was just, we were having fun.
And Colts Neck had a lot of good runners there too, because Zach Titoff was a really gifted runner there too, and I'm pretty sure he was their leadoff guy. Zach was a really good runner as well, and they had some other younger guys on there.
They ran 10:03, 10:04, and I think Craig split like 4:04 that day.
Yeah, Craig did some ridiculous things in high school, especially when he won the meet of champions with a broken hip. That might be the most ridiculous thing I ever heard him do.
Between Forties and Centro, like I had no business in that 2 mile heat. I think those guys ran like, I don't know, like 47, 48.
Yeah, it was. I was actually looking at it today. I think Central won in like 8:47, and then Craig was like 8:48.
Yeah, but you talk like this. You ran a 14:38 in high school and a 5K the first time running it on a track. Like you don't like you're downplaying, and this is what you do. You downplay. It's like, oh, I had no business running with those guys.
Best case scenario, I might have bet in top 5. Like,
but you see, the way you're a runner, though, you would have died to top 5 because you would have ran with both those guys. Like you just run. That is your style. You're not the type that's going to sit back and wait for a kick because you know your uncle would be sitting on the fence going, "That was the biggest pussy race I've ever seen in my life."
He left me at meets in high school. Like sincerely, I think we had a meet at Middletown High, like across the town from where Xavier was, and that was just a public school. Like, I thought I ran fine, but I kind of just like sat and kicked and ran like a 4:17, 4:18. And he's like, cool, it's only 6 miles back to campus, so I'll meet you there. And like, here's my ride. Like, he's like, you don't want to hurt yourself. Like, I'll pick you up back at school and I'll drive you home from there. Like, that's the environment I came out of.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get to sit back and like hobby jog. Like, you're here for a job. So yeah,
I want to jump to Marist. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
I was gonna say, like, what do you think now? Like, because like we've had on some guests, are you one of those, like, I want to say bitter, but like crazy at how fast everyone's running now? Like, there was a meet in Arcadia that we keep bringing up. If you run 9 flat, you were 75th place in a high school meet.
Sure.
Like, I was bitter at first until I like started doing this, and I just realized like there's so many more advantages now that, between coaching and everything's online to better tracks to better shoes. Yeah. So, but listen, it's crazy just how fast these kids now in high school run. It's unreal.
And it's always been like that, right? Yep. Like part of it is just the knowledge behind the coaching base. 1,000%. Obviously you can say super shoes play a part. Quite honestly, the best trainers I had were like these, what the fuck was it? The Joe Landreth, I think is what I trained in. Like,
I love the Joe Cayenos. The Joe Cayenos were, but you put those on now. These kids would put those on now and be like, "Oh, what are these? They're heavy. They suck."
Yeah, like arguably, yeah, I probably wouldn't have had some of the stress fractures I did, like pounding away on pavement. Like, sure, and I do think that plays in to a certain extent. I'd also just like to think that the competitiveness of the sport is getting better.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad to see that.
Absolutely.
We had Eric Holt on, and he talked about, I thought it was astute. He brought a list of reasons why everybody's so fast. And one of the ones that I think Dave and I both agreed and kind of was like, aha, he said back in the day, there was maybe 1 or 2 meets in a like month or few span that you would get a chance to run fast. Now there's like 5 meets a weekend where they're sitting there and running like really fast, sub 4, who's going sub 140 to like 145 here. Like these meets are everywhere and these rabbits are everywhere. So he's like, the chances to run fast are exponentially higher now, where you had like 7 chances to make standard a few years ago. You have like 20 chances now.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. I had like to try to get qualifiers for like Milrose, right? I remember we had to go to this meet at like Brown University in Rhode Island just to get someone to race against. And if I missed it, my only opportunity for the rest of the season was a meet at Yale at Cox Cage. Like I had 1 or 2 opportunities and that was it. And these kids now, like it's because it's even slightly more competitive on the tier 2 side. The guys that have potential for tier 1, they're hitting the races. Like that's just it. And it's great to see. Like there's no bitterness for me. I'm definitely, I mean, I wish I had some of the advantages they did. Sure.
We all do. Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, I mentioned my coach in high school was my uncle. The guy was like a 217 marathoner, which like we all looked at him as like, this guy's amazing, blah, blah, blah. Like nowadays that's decent. You're not making any US teams.
No. Insane.
But you're 217 in the 90s, he literally made US teams.
You'll be in the pro tier for every race you run, but that's about it. They'll put you in the pro tier, but that's it. You're not going to be. They're going to tell you to leave the upfront guys alone. Run your race. That's all they're going to say to you. Run your race.
And but as like a young athlete, I'm watching a guy who's like 217 and like, I don't know, my standard of good, and he's made US teams.
Yeah.
So like the pendulum just keeps swinging to the side, and I hope it never swings back the other way. But no, it's good to see. I do think that like it's like baseball, right? Like put an asterisk next to stuff 20 years ago. Not for the same reason.
Right.
But yeah, like that's just it. Is you've got to look at it like in the time it was ran, how competitive was this?
Yeah.
So fun sidebar about Cox Cage and Yale. I had one of my best races there and arguably one of the funniest races. First one, I was coming back from rehab in my first 800 of indoor, and I ran like a 159 and felt great. I think I got hurt 2 weeks later. Second time, I was coming back from rehab, decided to run a mile. Vess happened to be in that mile. I think Vess almost lapped me. It was a mile at Cox Cage. I ran like a 4:46. Vess ran like a 17 or something. It was just like a train. It wasn't a dead serious race for you, but you almost lapped me. So that's a fun memory.
Jesus Christ.
And I think Pete made fun of me. Like I came off and Pete's like, how do you almost let Vess catch you in a mile indoors? I'm like, I don't know, man. Leave me alone. So there's some fun facts. So let's talk a little bit about college. So you get the Marist, and as much as you had a bunch of injuries, we talked about those, you had a ton of success. You had MAC championships. You had an IC4A championship. Talk about some of your memories over at Marist and, give us some of these cool races that you were able to compete in. And don't be afraid to talk about some of your individual stuff, Vess.
Yeah, no. I'd say the first success I had in college was probably, it would have been Mac's sophomore year. I remember there was a stacked mile field with like this kid Milos from Serbia. I think he was running from Manhattan. There was a handful of Iona guys in the race.
Yep.
And it was similar to like most of the times when I won decent races. Like no one wanted to take the lead. Everyone's just kind of sitting back. If I remember right, we were all sitting on this kid, Alexander Soderberg from Iona. He was like a Swedish national champion, and like everyone was a little bit intimidated.
Yep.
Probably because he just didn't speak English and came off as like terrifying. I think same thing. No one took the lead. I got hostile about halfway through, and just took it through the end. And I was running scared because I knew Milos could kick in like a 25 at the end. Yeah, that was probably my first real success at Marist. And then like a week later was the IC4As. I think I had to race a kid, Dan Chenoweth, out of Harvard for that one. And yeah, similar setup. I led most of it. I think he took the lead with like 400 to go, and my last two just closed it. But that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I'd say that season was probably the best season I had, like as a redshirt freshman. And then I ended up with a bunch of stress fractures afterwards.
The fun thing you mentioned, Milos was a thorn in Marist's side. Every race he was in, he was always a threat. And I think he got you a few times and things like that. And it was always interesting because Milos, it was the guy like everyone kind of hated him racing against him, but off the track, it was always like, hey, what up, Milos? Like he was a decent enough dude, but on the track, it was like, I hate this guy.
So my freshman year at Marist, and I'm going to start this with like, I ended up friends with Milos by like junior, senior year. Like we were boys. We'd go and grab.
I think I know this story.
Across from VCP when Pete wasn't looking. I remember my freshman year, I was probably, that's back when you did like a loop event, Cortland Park, before you went into the back hills.
Yep.
So I'm taking that hard corner about a K in just before you go into the woods. And Milos just drops his shoulder and hits me. And I ended up with like a bloody rib cage and a ripped brand new Marist jersey. I think it was my first time in the kit. It was like I own a meet of champions or something. And I was like, fuck this guy. And I was pissed, but like that's literally just cross country in Europe. It was like, hey, welcome to the sport. And that indoor season, so that was towards the end of cross. Indoors, Milos left his like full set of Manhattan warm-ups unattended. So I literally took his full set of warm-ups with, and they hung in the track house at Marist for a couple years. And warmed up for a meet in front of him in the warm-ups I had stolen from him. And
this is Adam Vess, everybody.
And I thought he was going to punch me in the face. But no, he literally was like, hey, if I beat you, I get those back. And he didn't. And he's like, he literally just shook my hand and was like, all right, Mecca will give me a new pair. And that was it. Like, that was the entire conveation.
That's awesome.
And that's probably when you were like, all right, this guy's kind of cool. I don't mind him anymore. Like, he could take a joke. It's fine.
Yeah, like, to be fair, like, the Mac was super friendly, like, despite how much we, like, wanted to kill each other in races. But, yeah, that was kind of eye-opening, like, as a freshman, like, someone dropping a shoulder into you and hitting you into a fence line. I was like, oh, this is not high school where I just get to, like, win everything.
So talk about the MAC a little bit, because a lot of people might not hear like the MAC is a big competitive thing, but you were one of the people, and we actually, one of the things that Marist had pride in is we had a few guys that could break up some of the powerhouse that was Iona. We had Gurma, we had Dave Rauchi, we had Mike Rolick, some really good runners along with yourself. And then eventually, Will Griffin, Matt Flint, Quimez, guys that could come in and break up the dominance of Iona. You mentioned that the MAC was friendly, but talk about kind of the competitive nature of the MAC. Did you expect it to be as competitive? Because obviously, high expectations early in senior year kind of fell to the wayside. At least I'm going to Marist. It's D1. Did you expect the competition level to be so high at Marist in the distance events and the middle distance events like they were?
I did. To be honest, one of those schools that kind of shrugged me off coming into college was Iona. They had a recruiter at the time who literally like hung up. The conversation essentially went, hey, I have a lot of recruits. Call me if you make Foot Locker. And he hung up the phone. So when Pete approached me and was like, hey, we're typically second in the MAC to Iona, I'm looking at that as like, fuck these guys. So I came in with that mentality.
That was our chant. Our chant was fuck Iona.
Yeah, no. Anytime we were all like 3 beers in. No, it was a lot of fun. And again, like I spent a couple summers in college, like up in Vermont, training with like Ryan Sheridan and this kid Hicks, like Joe Parks, like a bunch of guys that were their top 5. Like I was their training partner for like weeks out of the summer. And the guys were fun, but yeah, beat them at any chance I got. And yeah, I knew fully how competitive it was coming in freshman year.
So I want to jump post grad, and then I want to get into your, career being in the industry. But post grad, right now we all know Northern Arizona as like this juggernaut of collegiate track. They're between them, Washington, like there's a new wave of some really good people. It's not just Oregon finally, right? Talk about going to Northern Arizona, because you were kind of a part of that first wave as a grad runner and then run Flagstaff Elite. Talk about how fun it was and kind of how different it was jumping into that environment.
Yeah. I'd say it was a similar environment to like me coming into Marist. I was actually supposed to go run for University of Oklahoma.
I remember that.
And I ended up with a stress fracture in my femur senior year, which took me out for like 6 months. I literally just like lost the last 6 months of my undergrad. And I had this bone density disorder that like they just didn't diagnose for like a year, which turns out was like most of the cause of these injuries. So I'm trying to think how this played out. Because of my family connections and whatever else from running in previous generations, I talked to Stanford and this coach, John Hayes at University of Texas. And Hayes was like, hey, like it's too late to get you in as a recruit. But the school I used to coach at, Eric Hines is over there. He was kind of the guy that took the reins after him. He was like, let me just make a phone call. So Eric called me a couple hours later and he was like, hey, we've got a spot in Northern Arizona. And to be totally honest, like NAU was solid. I think they were like 14th at nationals or like something the year before. Like they were decent.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, this is the only offer on the table. Right. So I jumped at it and was like, all right, it's better than staying home. So I sight unseen, like jumped on a flight, went to run for NAU. And the team was fantastic. My roommate was this kid, Dave McNeil, who had been to the Olympics once, was about to go for a second time, and he was a grad student. Diego Estrada was the lead runner. And it was a good environment. Like it was probably the polar opposite of Marist, as far as like how seriously everyone took things. And I was like back to being like bad influence on, yeah, like I was the juvenile, like bad influence on the team. Because I'm still used to like grabbing beers across the street from Van Cortlandt Park. But it was fun. For all like different reasons, it was fun. Kind of got to see how everything was at a bigger university. And then I did the volunteer assistant thing for like a year afterwards, finishing out. Yeah, I got to spend some time with like Eric Hines coaching on that level, which was solid. But at the end of the day, like I think we won a couple conference championships and stuff when I was there, but it really came down to like, I'm either going to keep coaching with these guys or I can continue my own progression in the sport. And I picked myself over that. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have, knowing full well that like the next year they won nationals for the first time of like that stretch.
Yep.
But no regrets, right? But no, it was a really good environment. And the guys were just as great. Like it was, if you just copied and pasted like the crew of, I don't know, Marist 20-year-olds and like put them in Adidas uniforms, it was the same thing.
Now, did you see like this longevity and the long success that they have now? Like, could you see that building and see that this is like a program that was going to be around at the top for a long time?
We did, but not at the depth. I remember one of my first, there was one weekend that I was an athlete on the team, and I watched Dave McNeil win the Aussie National Championship and qualify for the Olympics. Lopez Lamong finished a 10K, forgot there was another lap, so he stopped and then finished it and still won. and Diego was, we all kind of figured going to be an Olympian for Mexico. So like there was enough guys that had come through the program in the couple years before I showed up that like we knew they were going to be successful. It was not the powerhouse of recruiting it is now under Mike Smith. Mike is phenomenal at recruiting. And I think that's the difference. Nothing against Eric Hines. He didn't have, I don't know if it was the connections or just the reputation that NAU now has, where it's like a flywheel system of kids coming in and like, if you want to win a national championship, you go there.
Yeah.
At the time, like this was the state school where you got a couple Foot Locker kids, and that was the rest of it was just whatever homegrown talent walked through the door. So it's good to see. It's great to see. But it wasn't like that when I went through there.
Do you feel like you had something to do with that, though, being there, winning those conference championships, like helping build, and also kind of talk about, because still at the time, Oregon was still like one of the places to go. Like Oregon was still Oregon when you were there, because that was 2012, 2013 that you were there, right? Oregon was still Oregon, and who you are at NAU, and now like, and it's bizarre to see just the way Washington, American, NAU has just been chipping to the point now where, yes, Oregon is still amazing, but they're not the school only to go to.
And that's where I actually give a lot of credit to Eric Hines when I was there.
Yeah.
And Eric left like a year later, and like Mike Smith took over the program. Actually, 2 years after. But looking at recruiting as like a chess match, Eric did a lot of things to set up NAU for success. And what I mean by that is like, I was training with a guy named Bahalabi Gebroyahans, and I'm going to screw up that last name. And BB was fantastic. He was a good runner. He would have kicked the shit out of Mike Rolick on any race, right?
Yeah.
His younger brother was Footsum. Very few people even knew they were related because they were different last names and they were both refugees that came over. And Eric rolled out the red carpet for BB, knowing full well that he would get Footsum 3 years later.
Smart.
Which I think is a recruiting tactic that like cannot be overstated, the intelligence behind that decision. Because that program would not be where it's at right now had Footsum not been their lead runner.
Yeah.
Doing what he did coming through that university.
So yeah, that's awesome. And then you obviously, so you had fun over there. You obviously had a good time. You ran well. You went into the decision to go to run Flagstaff Elite. Again, run Flagstaff Elite was not kind of the reputation that they have now, where they're very, it's a destination, right? What was it like jumping on to that pro team, and was it another notch up from what you were just used to?
Yeah, it was actually funny because I came out of NAU and was like, at the time there was this group called McMillan Elite. I was like, all right, I'm going to go run with Greg McMillan. And I don't know what happened there. Something between either Greg not recruiting to Adidas' standards, or Adidas was going to pull funding and Greg knew the writing was on the wall. Like the whole thing just kind of dissolved. So for I think a full cross season, essentially everyone in Flagstaff was on the same page, and it was just run Flagstaff. That was the only option. It was the only pro team in town. So I got to run on a cross championship with like, I don't know, Ben Bruce and Nick Arciniaga and a bunch of these guys. And then it almost diluted the system. Again, hindsight's 2020. Northern Arizona Elite, which we called the Nazis at the time because I was on the other side of the spectrum. The team basically split in two. You had Northern Arizona Elite and Team Run Flagstaff Pro. And we were like the community organization. We had like on every Tuesday, like 200 people showing up at the track for like community workouts. We're like the pros are standing there like holding stopwatches. But a lot of that funding went into like our housing stipends and stuff like that to like keep us from going completely bankrupt. It ended up being like Ben Rosario's coaching, which is fantastic. Those guys are and better. We were all like kind of on our own coaching and whatever else. And eventually Team Run Flagstaff Pro, I think, more or less dissolved. It kind of became Dark Sky Distance Program with the community team there was taken over. Not taken over, but like they had a new director that kind of broke off, and it's now Dark Sky Distance Program or something of the sort. All under Stephen Haas, which he was like one of the original guys that had a lot to do with Team Run Flagstaff in the first place. But yeah, it definitely kind of broke up and like fractured the talent pool coming through Flagstaff, which is great now to see. Like if one team's not hitting out of the park, the other one is.
Yeah.
I was just there like at the right time to see like the fractures that took place and how it all ended up where it is now.
So I have a question. You know, growing up here on the East Coast, you go out to Arizona. Can you just briefly tell us what the difference is training at altitude? Because you always hear about it, but like, is it that much different than, you know, training at sea level or, you know, here on the East Coast?
It is. It was a godsend for me because with the history of stress fractures and like the issues I was dealing with when even undiagnosed till after I was in Flagstaff, essentially I just wasn't absorbing vitamin D through nutrition. So with, I don't know, dark East Coast winters, like you're just screwed. But the infrastructure around running in Arizona or in Flagstaff was unbelievable. You had these guys with like what used to be the Olympic Training Center is now Hypo 2. It was the best PTs and chiropractors in the world there to fix you as soon as you were in the least bit banged up. And it was great to have those resources. As far as the altitude goes, just being able to get the same cardio effort at a slower pace was unbelievable. Because what used to take pounding away at Marist, going 6 minutes a mile, trying to get the cardio benefits of like a 15, 16 mile long run, we were now on dirt roads running about 10% slower.
Wow.
For the same cardio benefit. So we're not.
Was it a lot more measurement of like your O2 and stuff like that in order to get there, like understanding like what you need to be at in order to get a, you know, the same physical comparison as to that?
Yeah. I mean, I had more, I had VO2 max testing and stuff like that when I was out there.
Yeah.
I had an Alter G treadmill if I started to feel a twinge that was like flaring up. And it was literally just like the guys at Hypo 2 were like, hey, go to the back door and ask this guy for a key. He'll let you in. And you could just go do your long run on like an Alter G treadmill. It was a very different environment in like the best way possible. But yeah, even fully healthy, just being able to go out and like run through the mountains at 8,000 feet was great. If we wanted to do a speed workout because it's mid indoors and we hadn't been on a track that wasn't at altitude. My wife at the time was teaching down in Sedona, which was like 4,500 feet. So if you look at elevation and like oxygen intake as like it's in as a bell curve going up, going down that low was like twice the oxygen level. Just 7,000 to 5,000 feet or 4,500 or whatever it was. And we would actually go down and crush these workouts running in the desert shirtless in January, February. And then we would show up at indoor meets and be fully ready to run, like the best cardio you could have possibly had. And we did not sacrifice anything as far as like our turnover or anything like that. Because just driving 45 minutes was that valuable.
Wow.
it kind of thinks like it's kind of crazy what the guys do at like Dartmouth, Syracuse, what we do in the Northeast, considering, like you said, the training over there just gives you, and it's why people around the world obviously go to train at altitude in America, because that seems to be a distinct advantage. So I want to get into your post-running career now, because that is kind of still where you are. You were fortunate, Dave and I are clawing our way back into sport via the podcast. We obviously coached a little and things like that, but you've stayed in the sport through coaching and being a professional in other means. Talk about what you've been doing post college, post being a pro athlete, post running, and, becoming a non-athletic regular person and just working in it.
Yeah. I guess in my life as a NARP, when I decided it was time to, hang up my spikes out in Arizona, and I had torn the labrum on the inside of my hip after that femoral stress fracture, and it got muddy to the point where I was like, I'm just not going to make the trials in the 10K, despite like a qualifier. I was like, I can't physically do it. So I sent out a bunch of resumes to just like running stores, and I was looking actually I loved the industry. Like I was working at Run Flagstaff at the time, the actual store that like sponsored the team. And I was their timing coordinator, like timing and managing road races and stuff like that, just on my off weekends. So I had some industry experience, and I sent out resumes to just everyone I could find in either Portland or Boston, knowing that if I wanted to work in the industry, like those were the two places to be. And I got a call from a couple guys at New Balance that like I used to race, I don't know, in high school or college, and they wanted me to come in for an interview. Great. So I fly into Boston, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to waste the trip. I went like door to door with resumes and was looking at other stuff in the area in case my interview at New Balance shit the bed. And I got a call from this kid, Pete Gilmore, who used to run at BU. He's like, hey, like I work for Marathon Sports. I've passed your resume on. They're going to call you. And at the time I was, I don't know, hanging out in Boston with a couple old friends just because I grew up in New England. And I went in for an interview at Marathon Sports right after my New Balance interview. And they're like, cool, we have management opportunities coming up down the line. Like, if you're going to be here, like we need you in a couple weeks. So I was like, cool, where do I sign? And that was it. I left my wife out in Arizona to sell a townhouse and pack up everything and finish out her school year of teaching.
Your wife is a saint, by the way.
Yeah, dude, you have no idea. So I took one of our two dogs and drove to Connecticut. And I spent the first couple of weeks while she was back in Arizona trying to sell the townhouse and pack everything up, commuting from like Hartford, Connecticut to Boston for what I was just hoping would pan out. And it did. Like I ended up, because of my, I don't know, running experience and like having the right guys making phone calls on my behalf, I ended up managing a partnership with the Boston Athletic Association, Adidas, and Marathon Sports.
Nice.
Called the Run Base in Boston. And we ran that program for a couple of years. It was like community outreach, and like we had a bunch of run clubs and yoga classes. It was like this combination of athletic store with public facilities. Like there was full locker rooms and showers and everything else for these groups. So I did that for a while and then managed a more proper running store for Marathon Sports.
So quick question with that first one. Did your experience with Run Flagstaff, as it became more of a like community thing, go into helping you create something like that, where you saw the people around Flagstaff bringing in the community to do these workouts? Did that help you in dealing with people who weren't necessarily 100% interested in being competitive runners, but just wanted to get some fitness in?
Yeah. Yeah, completely. We ended up like completely restructuring the way we did workouts. Like, Questa, when you and I were running like 800 meter repeats, right?
Yeah.
Or let's say 400 meter repeats, because let's be realistic. We would run a 400. You'd have 60 seconds rest from the time the last guy came through. So like if you finished earlier, you had more rest, right?
Yep.
The way we were actually structuring it for community organizations, both in Arizona and then what I brought to Boston, was it was all on goes. So you had 2:30 goes. And that was actually major for me learning how to coach in that environment, because if you came through and you ran a 70 on a 2:30 go, you had a minute and 20 seconds rest. If you came through and you ran a 60, you had a minute rest. So the slower you were going, if you had a bad interval, you just had more rest. But it's more welcoming to newcomers because you're never left behind. You're never the person everyone's waiting on. It may become more of a threshold run than more of an interval workout. Mm-hmm. Sure. Like the rest is almost non-existent. But having that type of the ability to flip that switch and recognize like, hey, this isn't the right demographic to be doing that.
Yeah.
Was major. And we had the biggest run clubs in Boston. Literally on a Tuesday night, we could have like 80, 90 people showing up to do like a fartlek workout. But it was all based on that, which was very different than college training, but a lot more welcoming to like your hobby jogger weekenders.
That's great.
So would you say that your whole experience in the sport certainly helped you with your post-running career? Every experience that you went through, high school, college, pro, all of that kind of you used to encompass what you were doing now and what you are doing in terms of staying in the sport? Oh,
completely. Yeah. And I'd say a large part of that is just the connections in the sport. Like, Questa, the fact that you called me and I jump on a podcast, like that same type of connection is how I have gotten the last half dozen jobs I've had.
Yeah. It's
just guys I used to run with, or I knew who they were and they knew who I was. And that was it.
Vess barely knew who I was, so I got lucky.
Yeah, I remember some nights at Darby's. It's fine.
Would get us all in for free. That's all because I work there. Pete, don't listen.
No, but like that connection is the blessing of the sport. Like if you're in the athletic industry, particularly in running, like you're never more than one or two connections away from the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
I had guys that like I didn't know who the hell they were when they were running at BU or Dartmouth, and like they happened to train with someone I used to train with, and like that was it. Like that's all we needed to like make lifelong friendships, because it's a weird sport. But that's served me really well, and I think that's something that people don't appreciate is the connections you make through the sport. If you're just like a sincerely genuine person, you're not a dick to people you meet, you're meeting a lot of people that can serve you really well in your 20s and 30s.
And, when I described it before on the show, and I think you'd agree, I joke about the fact that you almost lapped me, right? But it doesn't matter what place you're in track. If you gave 100%, that lactic acid buildup feels the same. Yes, some people can handle that better, but the pain is the same. The struggle you go through is the same. The difference is who can handle it better and negate it better. And then there is a talent aspect, but overall, it's unique to any other sport where last place and first place are feeling the same pain. And we can respect each other for the fact that we towed the line and we finished the race. Like there is a respect that you get from competitor to competitor.
Completely. And for the record, I've spent enough time with community groups where like, Questa, whatever you ran in the mile that day, 99% of the population would still look at you as a god.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about it. That's like, we talk about it, and we had Johnny Gray on here, and he was talking about, I was training some guys, and I had some 146, 147 guys that were never, they were okay. And I stopped them. I'm like, how spoiled are you? 146, 147. Easy when you ran when you're a 142 guy. But it's like,
we all have such like fucked up skewed perspectives on the sport. Yeah. Like,
I would give up both testicles and my Johnson to go run a 146. Like honestly, like it would be a dream. But for him, he's just like, I had some guys that were okay. It's like, Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but you got to step back and recognize like you have a messed up perspective with sport.
Absolutely.
Like that's not 99.9% of the people out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So continue to go through. You're running some more stores at Marathon, and then what else occurs in your career? Where else are you jumping to?
I spent probably a year plus as like a buyer for Marathon Sports. So I'd been like helping out like the Boston Marathon Expo and stuff like that previously, but then I ended up like actually managing like large portions of that as far as the booths and stuff coming through the event. And there was a fairly new company to the industry called Atrex that they do 3D foot scanning technology. They'll actually like in like a 10-second scan, like you're standing on like a medical grade pressure mat and there's 3D cameras and it's you're going to be more prone to this type of injuries just because of your biomechanical stance. Needless to say, based on my history, I took to this like fairly well. And the tech worked for me. And it basically whatever you have, like there's a different insole or like footwear combination you should be using. It'll recommend like based on AI learning. And this is a couple years back before AI was like, you can talk to it on your computer or whatever. So I ended up going from a buyer at Marathon to actually the territory manager for that company. So for the last while, I've actually been overseeing everything from New England, occasionally up in Montreal province, and then down through like New York, New Jersey, PA, actually in charge of that territory. So I've been dealing with all of that, basically teaching not just running stores, but like guys fitting for work boots. Like, hey, how do you not feel like hell when you've been paving for 12 hours?
That's terrifying thinking that you are teaching people to have that much power.
Yeah. No, I think I have like 300 active accounts in the territory. But no, that's been fun. And it's good to see different sides of what I would call the athletic industry. Cause like I have no business talking to work boot guys. Besides like my old man's a contractor. I gotta fake it. But like we're talking to hockey shops and tennis stores that are selling pickleball shoes, and hey, how do you not get injured when you're 55, 60 playing pickleball? And it's been a little eye-opening, like even more so than just the athletic. But again, that was something where like I was just friendly with the last outgoing sales rep. We kind of bonded, or trauma bonded over like our previous running experience. And like, we were just buddies. So he was leaving and he's like, hey, here's a job if you want it. And it worked out, like interview process and everything aside, like, it all came back to just my experience running personally.
I mean, that's awesome. And I feel like that's something that could benefit everyone in the sport. And that's such a cool technology. And it kind of reminds me of what like Dr. Scholl's is going for, but actually really doing it. And not what Dr. Scholl's just puts in the middle of your Walmart.
Medical grade Dr. Scholl's, that would be Atrex tech.
You mean just to go to your local pharmacy and stepping on that machine isn't the answer?
I hate to burst the bubble.
I've been duped.
Unless there's a cardboard cutout of Adam Vess standing next to it, then it's not real. But so I want to jump into a topic that we talk about with the rest of our guests, because obviously that's what you're doing right now. That's fantastic. And we need that in our sport as well. And I think the super shoes are kind of stealing your thunder there, because they're just like, wear these and run fast and you might not die. Like that's kind of where they're at. But I want to talk to you about one thing we ask a lot of our guests. How do we improve this sport? How do we make this sport not from something where three guys on a podcast who all ran at a collegiate level, you at a pro level, can sit around, talk about it and enjoy it, but to where you were doing the community outreach, you were doing certain things. How do we bring this sport to casuals where there could be a track meet on TV and they don't just flip it the moment the 400's done?
Sure. And let me start with, again, my skewed perspective from like my running background, and then I'll get into like, I guess, the more casual side of it.
Yeah.
On the competitive side, pro contracts suck. Let me tell you, from base level pro contract, right? You're given a housing stipend, you're given essentially enough for like fucking meal allowances. And all of your incentive is to win races in the kit, have a sponsored race by your sponsor, and then show up and win it. Because they just, when I was running for Under Armour, I was injured. I had a torn hamstring, and I flew to Baltimore for this 5K, and they're like, "Cool, you're gonna win, because it's Baltimore, and this is Under Armour." And I got off the plane, and they needled my hamstring, and were like, "You'll be fine. You can't, like, this will slow you down enough that you can't physically rip it." And I think part of that was just like the athlete coordinator talked to me, had no idea what they were doing, but I just did it because I was under contract. And I did it. I won the 5K at like the Baltimore Marathon or whatever, and I hated every minute of it. Like, it wasn't fun anymore because my mentality at that point was, I have a mortgage payment. I need this couple grand.
Yeah.
And I think we lose a lot of pro athletes in the sport to that B tier elite, where like you're not coming out of college where you have a set income. And I think that's where a lot of places around the world where they have a different mentality about it, or they have less other opportunities, where those guys stay in the sport longer. And those are the guys that you really see taking off in their 30s or in their late 20s, early 30s, are like winning the Boston Marathon. Like, some of those guys would not have been in the sport long enough, except for the way that the contracts are structured. I think it would go a long way to giving people like a more livable wage, and not have it strictly be incentive based. Now, I understand the reason for being incentive based. Obviously, like, you want some return on investment.
I kind of don't. I hate that. I hate it. I get it. We're a winning type of thing. Like, track is very winning oriented, right? But there's got to be more to it. And that's, the current system is broken.
Absolutely.
Completely agreed. And you want the epitome of this. It's females in the sport when they get pregnant, right? Here's the most winningest American of all time. Oh, she's pregnant. We're going to drop the contract for a year and a half.
Right.
Like, if you want, first of all, from a footwear brand standpoint, I understand that business decision. I think it's the wrong business decision. And I think until we flip that switch and make this more about the actual athlete and the actual infrastructure of these athletes coming up in the U.S., we're going to keep getting our asses kicked. And we'll get the occasional guy who like actually came out of college as like the top of the class and holds on and is still the top of the class. But I know a lot of guys that came out of college as nothing, not nothing, but like 9-minute 3K guys in steeple that are like top in the Olympic trials, like top 10 guys, that they just did it because they loved it and they were passionate about it.
Yeah.
But how many of those guys didn't take that risk and follow that trajectory because it didn't make financial sense? And I think that's something that like we really just, I can't overstate enough how much we are bad at that. Now, as far as involving the community and everything like that, like absolutely, we need more running stores, period. I unfortunately think running is becoming more of a, running stores in particular are becoming more of a white collar environment type thing.
Absolutely.
Where if your town doesn't have a Whole Foods, it's not going to have a running store. I know this because I've sat in these meetings where we're talking about where to open stores and where not to, and we're using stuff like that as a baseline. I think if we are going to truly bring in the community, we need to find a way to make running stores more profitable for the independents that are bringing it in and that are having community runs 3 times a week. And I don't necessarily have the answer on that, although
does it have to do with how expensive our shoes are? With the fact that, if you want to get there's some decent trainers, but back in the day when we were running, when Dave was running, you could get a fair pair of trainers for like $85-$90. It wouldn't be amazing, but you can get a decent pair that would last you the 300-mile life that you needed, yada, yada. Now, if you want to get a good pair of trainers, it's like minimum 120, 130. That's I guess inflation has a lot to do with that, obviously. Sure. But at the same time, with that inflation, there's less money with the people. So do you think it's kind of has to do with the fact that people are kind of turned off because what if I don't like running? I'm going to go spend the $120 on shoes and then I hate it and now I'm stuck with these things. Do you think that's a factor?
Yeah. And first of all, I think the average running shoe right now is like 140.
Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah.
I think the Brooks Ghost went up to 140.
You can easily spend $200 on a pair of trainers.
Yeah, completely. You get a good pair of shoes, good pair of insoles for the shoes. You're in at like $190, right? I think 195 would be pretty average for the industry on that. I do think that's a large part of it. I also think that we need, with more stores, the education around why that's worth it ends up panning out. Now, you've seen, models like Fleet Feet where they want 400 stores in the next, I think they're at like 250 and they want 400 in the next whatever years.
We interviewed the owner from Poughkeepsie, Kim Caruso.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm happy for them and I hope they hit it. But if you look at where they're opening locations, it's like the most affluent towns in every state.
Right.
Yeah.
And we need to figure out a way to make running shoes and more access to the sport more accessible.
More accessible to everyone.
Completely.
Not just your high end, usually the
upper middle class people, basically.
Listen, when I was managing like a proper running store out here, it was in Wellesley, Massachusetts. That is the most affluent suburb in the most affluent state, like in the US. It was shooting fish in a barrel to separate people from their money. And I maybe don't include that.
Oh no, this is raw. It's on.
But that's the issue is that's where running stores exist. And until we figure out a business model that takes that to the masses and you get your weekend warrior who's running once or twice a week but they're coming to a run club and they're involved and stuff like that. You're just not going to see it turn around.
So here's a question. Might be like a chicken or an egg question here. Is it more important to get the athletes out front and running races consistently so fans can see them and then be attracted to go buy a pair of shoes? Or is it more important to get these running stores in the community, get people interested, and then let them start learning the names of athletes and maybe going on to Peacock and getting a subscription because they heard about this person. They want to watch them run in the Diamond League. Which one do you think should come first, or should we really try to multitask and do both at once?
We should try to multitask because I don't see a reason that corporations couldn't be going after second-tier athletes more than they are. The more important one at the end of the day becomes from grassroots. We need more active people out there running.
Yeah.
For better or worse, we've seen it with the sport of track and field with the concussion tests and everything coming around on football. The number of high school athletes coming out for track and field is unbelievable. Any coach you talk to, and I assume you included, you're getting athletes in numbers that you probably wouldn't have 5 years ago. So I do think that there's some positivity around the sport that I hope pans out over the next 10 years. Fortunately, we won't really know for 10 years. But I really do think if we double down as far as the community outreach, we can do a whole lot better as an industry.
So we talked to Eric Sawinski, and he brought up being able to get local sponsors as pros and not just have your one contract sponsor, being able to get your own personal sponsors in town and put them on the back of your jersey, fill it up on your singlet, and do something like that. And we've also talked to Sarah Slattery, who suggested making gambling a big part of track and field in meets and allowing people to kind of, and I said, as dehumanizing as this would be for the athletes, instead of gambling in the way that we see, kind of do win, place, and show horse gambling, because it would be much easier for people to bet that way, see people's previous races, see what they've done. I think that kind of be the way to go. Do you think there's a way to convince enough corporations or enough big running groups to kind of put their, I need my piece of the pie. I need my piece of the pie aside to kind of get a conglomerate league going that we can do something like this? Because I look at UFC, I look at the PGA, I look at World Tennis. They figure it out. They're all individual sports. They're basically all individual contractors that agree to go underneath this governing body. Obviously, LIV throwing a skew in that, but still a similar style thing. Why can't track in America do that? Like, what do you see from coming in, being a store owner, being a pro? What is stopping a company from seeing how freaking profitable this could be if done right?
I think it's sponsorships. Like, everyone has their own sponsors, and getting all those sponsors to agree, like that Nike agree with Adidas and then New Balance. It's going to be hard for them all to kind of see a similar path for all the athletes.
Yeah, I think that's just it. Like, in order to have a governing body, someone's going to have to come in with a lot of money to put that together, which is immediately going to put their interest top of the pile. And unfortunately, I don't see a way where, let's say it used to be Nike. Now I'd arguably say it's Hoka that would come in with that much money and capital behind them.
Yeah.
I don't see a way where Hoka is going to be willing to play second fiddle to anyone else in the industry, just based on the way the industry is structured. Now, if there's a lot more money coming into the industry as a whole because of that grassroots spectrum, I do think that there's a lot more money to go around, and that would inevitably relieve some tensions. Like gambling as a short-term fix. I actually wish the BAA would have let people bet on the marathon this past year. Just because I think the viewership would have gone up from like 600,000 to 700,000. But I don't think that's realistic right now. I don't think there's enough people that know what the hell they're looking at. I really think it comes down to just, we need to get more people active and into a active lifestyle so that they care more.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely, and Dave, I love that we do this, right? Because how many different perspectives have we got now? And this is
so many.
Grassroots groundswell. I really am going to make cuts of all the people that we've had and all their suggestions, and eventually get like whatever, how many shows we do, hundreds of cuts. Package it, send it to USATF, and be like, send it to all of them, the big sponsors and everything, and say, fucking do something. This is your community. These are your pros. These are your Olympians. These are your store owners. These are your casuals. Do something. Make money off of doing it, but do something, because we need it. And it annoys me that we have all these great ideas, and it's just like, and listen, I don't mind the free market system. I love the free market, but damn, sometimes you got to play nice. Like, sometimes you got to play nice, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, until we have enough of that grassroots, like there's not enough money coming into the industry. When we look at this as like and when we look at the run specialty as an overall spectrum of the athletic shoe market, it's 1%. It's less than 1%.
That's terrible. That sucks.
Because most people, that means more than 99% of people that need their athletic shoes are going to a Dick's Sporting Goods and picking something based on color, or they're going to Marshalls or DSW or TJ Maxx.
Or Kohl's. Yep.
Right. And that's what they consider an athletic shoe, and they don't know the difference. So if they don't know what a Hoka is, or if they don't recognize an A6 logo
or an On or whatever,
if they're calling it QC, like they're
not even saying it right.
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
in people's defense, On's logo is kind of freaking confusing.
it does kind of.
It is confusing, so I understand. And like when I first saw the brand, I've had to ask him like, "What is that?"
Hey,
Someone please tell me what that is.
they are getting all stud runners, man.
Oh, they're great. On's a great.
Nathan Ritzenheim is killing it.
Yeah,
completely. But until we really carve out that like Run Specialty has a bigger share of the marketplace, like we're just not going to see the cash flow that you guys are talking about.
Right. And that makes sense. And again, and I love it because from a business perspective, you gave us another one from the business perspective. So it's great to kind of get this, mosaic of all the opinions and what we're going to need, like I said, in order to cut all this together, get a plan, and then bug a bunch of rich nerds that were distance runners that now are Fortune 500 because distance runners are freaking nerds that make a lot of money. So we just need to make a conglomerate of them and bug them enough that they put in a lot. So
when does this episode come out?
This episode is probably going to be out tomorrow. And I know you said you might have something to say, but I don't want to burst any bubbles.
Can't do it. There are companies out there that are trying to bridge the gap between running stores being just like in high affluent areas and stuff like that, and they're getting very creative with how to bring more of the general public in, nice, but also have that high end service. And I can show you this if you want to look at it, like something to look into. Okay. While I may or may not be going into business with these guys in about a week. But I do think that there are ways to expand into more blue collar environments than what's currently out there. Like not the Fleet Feet model, like ways to make running stores more profitable in your more regular communities. Because I think that's going to be the key to success in sport.
I have an idea. And, since you're on the shoe side, maybe you can say yay or nay to this. Why don't we go to even low income areas and rent shoes? Rent them. Here's a shoe, rent them. And if if it gets destroyed beforehand, now you will be, but rent shoes because maybe they can't full on buy it, or buy it in increments here. Like, $200 to your regular Joe Schmo. And even now, $200 to anyone's a lot of freaking money. So it's like, why can't we work something out like that where here,
a payment plan,
make a payment plan for these shoes, but go use them.
And I think as far as a payment plan, like, stuff on layaway and stuff like that definitely has a place in the market. Personally speaking, if I run mid to forefoot, if I was running a pair of shoes and the last two guys were pronators in, I would have a personal problem with that. So I do think there's something to be said about like just the personalization of the tech to the user. I don't think lends a way to do that. But I think you're on the right track. Like we have to make this more profitable for everyone involved
and more economically feasible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if that means that you have to merge a running store with, I don't know, whatever other something else that draws people in from the community, we have to figure out how to do that so that a running store might be able to be half of your business.
Right. Like what if you own a running store and you rent out space in a Dick's or something like that. So that way there's at least someone there who knows the actual sport, who can actually, because if you walk in those stores now, they have no idea what pronating means or supinating. Yeah. They have no idea. So someone within a actual larger store, but there's a certain running component and there's a person there who can tell you.
Yeah. Literally that'd be called an SIS display or shop and shop display. Yeah. I do think that would be a viable option for it. I've also seen shops get creative. There's a couple down in Texas where they literally only carry running shoes. First of all, there's no apparel, there's no socks. It's just running shoes. But there's a microbrewery in the back.
Runners like to drink.
These are some of the most profitable shops I've ever seen with the lowest overhead. They're carrying, instead of $50,000, about $12,000 worth of footwear. They're carrying bread and butter SKUs that are turning like wildfire, just doing constant fill-ins. and they're just brewing beer for Run Club 3 days a week.
You got to meet the community where they're at.
I think that there's ways to do it, and we just have to get better at it. We've all been hitting our head against the same like Fleet Feet model of like just come in, turn and burn. Everyone has a $200 ticket. Most people can't afford that. We've got to figure out a different way to get people in the door.
Yeah, certainly. And I think with that, we can close it out because, this became, like a lot of our shows, a very educational show on a different side. Like your story, is fantastic. Obviously you had a lot of success, you had trials and tribulations, but that's always good. And then when we got to like what we've been seeing, what you've been doing, it's become educational for anyone that's listening on to. And if people question like Dave and I, because Dave and I come in this with what we've been getting from all of our guests and certain things, and now kind of asking questions to the new guests and talking about what they've been and now getting your perspective and this perspective. And it's really getting to be something really cool that we're getting here that, like I said, maybe one day we'll smorgasbord it all together. We'll steal all your ideas. We'll give you guys no credit and then we'll go make money.
Yeah, I love it. And that's the point. That's the point of the market, right? Like, have at it.
I love it. All right. So Dave, anything else you want to say before we jump out of here?
No, man, this was extremely educational. I enjoyed listening to your story, and I love the fact that you used all of your background in the sport to carry on and to make a career out of it after the running career was over. I think that's also something that would definitely benefit more people if there were more opportunities for people who love the sport to stay involved and actually make some money off of doing that as well. So thank you for coming on. It was an absolute blast, and I appreciate it.
Awesome, guys. Well, hey, I appreciate taking the time.
So once again, he's Adam Vess. You heard his story. He's one of my former teammates over at Marist. Obviously a great runner in his time and now doing what he can to stay within the sport, to do some cool stuff. We'll be hearing more from Vess. I'll force him to come back on the podcast at some point. We'll eventually be going live streaming so you guys can see his mug on the show at some point. So again, this is Talking in Ovals. Go find us on social media at Talking in Ovals. Spread this word of mouth. Like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars. We'll be back again next week. So long, everyone.